I want to talk about an angle to the recent presidential debate that we've not yet discussed. We did a lot of discussion about Donald Trump's lies. We did quite a bit of discussion about the issues that were covered and where areas in which Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump did well or didn't do well. But we haven't talked so much about what wasn't talked about in that first presidential debate. And there's a really interesting article that I would take a look at if I were you, by Adam Johnson of Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. And it goes into what topics were not covered in the first presidential debate. And very often, looking at the absence of something tells us just as much or more at looking at the presence of something. For example, when we looked at corporate media coverage of Occupy Wall Street, on the one hand, we could look at, well, Fox News was much more aggressively negative about the protesters as people versus CNN that was much more positive about the protesters as people, etc. But what was missing from all of corporate media in the coverage of Occupy Wall Street was, hey, let's discuss areas in which capitalism has served us well and areas in which capitalism has not served us well, which was really one of the main points of Occupy Wall Street that was missing from corporate media coverage about Occupy Wall Street. So let's apply that now in looking at Adam Johnson's article about what was missing from the presidential debate. The article makes some good points, but I don't agree with everything that's being said. Some of the topics that Adam Johnson points to as being missing, I think there's a pretty good case to be made that they should not really be debate topics. And I'm going to get into that, okay? So how did the topics play out? We were told the first debate was about achieving prosperity, America's direction, and securing America. It played out as basically an opportunity for a lot of discussion of everything from emails, insults, tax returns, etc. Not invalid topics, but really not particularly substantive policy discussion. So Adam Johnson points out, listen, in this debate, we had no questions about poverty. We had no questions or discussion about abortion, not really anything about climate change, immigration, which has been a huge part of Trump's fear-mongering campaign, was essentially missing, healthcare, student debt, privacy, LGBT rights, drug policy, missing from the debate. So here's what I want to suggest to you, our audience. Some of these issues are very notable because they are issues of importance and they are very, very valuable issues to discuss. For example, immigration, huge issue. It's being used to push people for and or against candidates. Donald Trump has made it a central element of his campaign, not discussed. Poverty, huge, huge issue. Poverty is an issue of paramount importance, not discussed within that first debate. But some of these other issues, I'm less convinced really have a place in national political debate. So I'm going to give you an example, right? Let's talk about abortion. Abortion is a legal medical procedure. I would say that it is a victory. It says a lot about our country if abortion is not part of national presidential campaigns, because really, particularly now that more than half of Americans, for the first time since Roe v. Wade, say that abortion should be legal in most cases, there really shouldn't be anything controversial about abortion. Now, I know you'll hear me say this and you'll say, well, David, you may be right that there shouldn't be anything controversial, but there is still huge opposition to abortion, particularly among the Republican right, the evangelical religious right. A lot of money is being raised around being against abortion, so it is controversial. And you're right, and I completely agree with you. But the absence of abortion in a national debate, I believe, is by and large a good thing. Let me give you another example. LGBT rights. LGBT rights really should not be controversial. If you want to get married to someone, you should be able to get married to that person regardless of what genitals you or they were born with. That's absolutely clear to me. If you work at a job, you should not be able to be fired because of your perceived or actual sexual orientation. There should be no discrimination allowed based on gender. We shouldn't be dealing with laws about which bathroom can you use and how can you prove which bathroom you can use. So I think it is progress if LGBT rights no longer have to be parts of these presidential debates. However, and you're absolutely right if you're about to tell me, but David, there is discrimination. You still can be fired in many states for your perceived or actual sexual orientation, so it should be part of the debate. I agree with you. I agree with you. But my big picture reaction is poverty being missing from a presidential debate and LGBT rights discussions being missing from a presidential debate. They are different because one is an issue that is objectively an issue that needs to be fixed and dealt with, whereas the other is something that is only an issue because of retrograde conservatives.
Well, one thing they definitely should have talked about is corruption in politics.
Yeah.
I mean, to this day, we don't know Donald Trump's position on Citizens United.
Yeah. Well, the reason we're not going to see too much discussion in national debates, what you're really getting at is campaign finance, is because no matter what 99.9% of national politicians say about, well, we've got to prevent this anonymous spending that you can do, they'll come up with some line. By and large, these major politicians are in power because of the system we have, and there's a huge disincentive for them to want to change it. So there's what I call sometimes, Pat, no-win topics, where to whose advantage is it to talk about it? Maybe Trump is actually better off on this one because he can say, hey, I'm not someone who has ever benefited as a recipient of the money that floats around, although he said he has been involved in buying politicians with donations. But there's really no upside, I think, to either of them to bring that up.
And not only to the candidates, too, but the commission on presidential debates run by the two parties and by the networks.
Yeah, no, it's a lose-lose. And another example I gave was we hear Trump and Hillary Clinton both talk about, I'll bring jobs back. We're not going to keep sending jobs to Mexico. We're going to get ourselves out of trade agreements. Whatever their policies are, neither of them says, hey, you know what? We are going to lose millions of jobs in the next 15 years because of automation, because it's zero sum. You gain absolutely nothing if you're Trump or Clinton by admitting no matter what she says, no matter what he says, no matter what I say, there are going to be jobs lost. It's a loser. It's not going to get you any votes whatsoever. So not all absent topics created equally is my reaction to Adam Johnson's article about what wasn't discussed at the debate. Let me know what you think about this. I'm on Twitter at @DPakman, and of course, we are all on Facebook at facebook.com/David Pakman Show. I've talked about how people of all ages, but particularly millennials, are owning cars less and participating more in the sharing economy. And one of the more popular options is Zipcar, which gets you a car when you want it, when you need it. They offer all sorts of cars, SUVs, hybrids, whatever you need. It includes insurance and it includes gas. You just pay for the time that you actually use the car. And you can reserve the car online from your smartphone over the phone. Then you unlock it with your Zip card. Each car share member reduces their personal CO2 emissions by between 1,100 and 1,600 pounds per year. For our audience, Zipcar is offering $25 of free driving credit if you sign up at joinzipcar.com/David. Support our show, reduce your carbon emissions and your spending on cars. Sign up at joinzipcar.com/David.